Welcome back to the class. In this session, we will be discussing about Herbert Spencer, a very important British philosopher who has tremendously contributed for the formation of sociology as a discipline. Hope you remember in the previous class we discussed the contributions of Auguste Comte, widely considered as the father of sociology. So Auguste Comte had a very significant impact on Herbert Spencer's thinking because many of his arguments were influenced. Herbert Spencer was born in Derby in England in 1820, and it's very interesting thing to note that he did not receive any formal education. He was educated by his father and his uncle, but he turned out to be one of the very influential and widely popular philosophers of his time, and he has written extensively, and his academic interest spread across different areas. So it's been widely considered as a very surprising fact that a person who did not receive any formal education or who did not attend any college or university became so influential and became a very prolific author and thinker. So he viewed himself as a philosopher who can propose a grand project for uniting ethics, natural science and social science. This great project was termed as synthetic philosophy. And as we have seen in the previous classes as well, thinkers like Montesquieu or thinkers like Saint-Simon, or even to a large extent even Auguste Comte, they were all preoccupied with the possibility of providing a much larger social law, a kind of a larger social law that can be applicable across the globe, across societies, across the time, because they were heavily influenced by the way in which natural sciences, physics, chemistry and biology were taking shape. And here Spencer was no different. He wanted, or he proposed to formulate a theory which unites ethics, natural science and social sciences. And you must be by now knowing that this was too much an ambitious project, a project which is too grandiose in its nature, and he termed it as kind of synthetic philosophy, a very broad, very overarching kind of a philosophy that includes almost every aspect of human as well as natural society. So his ideas became controversial later and lost their popularity after his death, and we will come back to his this particular point later because many of his arguments that he made towards the end of his life, especially related to say the whole idea of social Darwinism, which put so much of criticism on him. He was thoroughly criticized by a whole lot of people for some of his very controversial and very conservative arguments. So he was very heavily influenced by theorists like Malthus, von Baer and Charles Darwin. These theorists, especially for example Malthusian's theory about population growth and Charles Darwin's theory about this natural selection and evolution, these theories very significantly influenced Herbert Spencer's thinking, because he always wanted to find a parallel between the human society and the organic society, human society and the animal society or the organic society. So that theme actually runs through his entire scholarship or his entire academic career. So Spencer came to emphasize that evolution is a process of development from an incoherent, undifferentiated and homogeneous mass to a differentiated and coherent pattern in which the functions of structure are well coordinated. And this is a very important and very interesting definition of evolution. And you will be able to see that this understanding of evolution or this particular characterization of evolution can be applicable to both natural society as well as human society. And exactly Herbert Spencer argued like that. So he argued, he provided a definition that evolution is a process of development from an incoherent, undifferentiated and homogeneous mass. So you have from a very simple situation, from a very incoherent, undifferentiated, simpler and homogeneous mass to a differentiated and coherent pattern in which the functions of structures are well coordinated. So here you come across these two terms, functions as well as structures. And these two terms are extremely important because they laid foundation for the later development of structural functionalism as a very important theoretical school. I have made this remark several times in the previous classes, but this is an extremely important point, that the whole preoccupation with the question of the structure of a society and the kind of a corresponding function, how certain functions are performed, or how it is imperative that certain structures are so important, so significant for performing certain kind of function, the kind of a connection between function and structure. This became one of the most important talking points or important point of theoretical reflection among the scholars of this particular time. So Herbert Spencer was heavily influenced by this Herbert Spencer was heavily influenced by this theme of structure and function, and he found that the natural evolution or the evolution of the species as articulated by Charles Darwin as something very fascinating, where he can adopt and borrow these ideas into that of human society. So Social Statics is the name of his book, and in this book, considered to be a very important contribution of Herbert Spencer, he argues that human happiness can be achieved only when individuals can satisfy their needs and desires without infringing on the rights of others to do the same. So a natural understanding of utilitarian understanding of human needs and how human needs to have a certain kind of boundaries, how everybody has these similar kind of needs, and how all of them have to have certain kind of understanding and restrictions, so that as a collectivity they will be able to pursue their needs, and presented this as a law of ethics and morality. So he has been later been criticized heavily for taking up a very laissez-faire kind of position, where he argued that people has to be completely free. So this forms the basis of a law that he wanted to combine both ethics and morality. And also, I mentioned in the previous class, this term, a law of ethics or a law of morality, now looks quite problematic, because no social scientist at present would use the term law to describe anything related to the social. You don't have a social law as a law similar to a law that is there in physics or chemistry, but during Spencer's time, this was the norm, or most of the philosophers during his time envisaged formulating a set of laws that would be applicable to society the way natural laws are applicable to the natural world. So in this book, Social Statics, he sought to discover invariant laws and principles of social organization. They believed in that there are invariant laws, there are very immutable laws and principles that govern social organization. And secondly, he began to engage in organismic analogizing, drawing comparison between the structure of individual organism and that of society. And this is again a very important term that we came across when we discussed Auguste Comte, and a term which was given so much of attention and so much of theorization by Herbert Spencer. He has a very detailed analysis of organismic analogy, where he makes a comparison between the structure and function of a living individual organism and that of a society. So he believed that there are parallels, there are similarities, as well as there are differences between the way an individual organism function as well as a society function. And we will just touch upon some of these observations later, but I am not going into the details. Those who are interested can read material on that. He makes a list of similarities between a living organism and that of society, also a set of differences. But these arguments have kind of lost its significance, so I am not really spending much time on that. But this particular line of thinking, that comparing human society with that of a living organism, which is known as organismic analogy, was a very important foundational concept that laid the foundation for the emergence of structural functionalism. So structural functionalism, as we have seen, that emerged in the writings of Auguste Comte, developed through Herbert Spencer, and later developed in a more sophisticated manner by Emile Durkheim, later had its growth and development in anthropology, in social anthropology, and of course later in in American sociology, championed by say Talcott Parsons, and by 1960s this particular theoretical foundation or theoretical orientation loses its significance. So in his book Social Statics again also reveals the beginning of Spencer's functionalism, as we just mentioned. He viewed societies like individuals as having survival needs with specialized organs emerging and persisting to meet these needs. So the basic question that people like Spencer argued during that particular time, how do societies survive? What are the basic needs of a society? For example, how is a particular society finding the kind of an economic resources for its survival? How is a society devising a specific mechanism to govern itself? How is a society evolving a very specific set of morals and ethics so that there is some kind of a semblance of acceptance among each and every member of that particular society? So he identified each of these things as certain kind of survival needs, certain kind of functional needs. And when you come to Durkheim and later functionalist, this becomes more complicated kind of set of questions about functional needs, about functional prerequisites. But Spencer was one of the most important and influential thinker who began elaborating that, who began theorizing these things. And also connecting with this survival needs or functional needs with specialized organs emerging and persisting to meet these needs. So what are the kind of mechanisms that are at the disposal of a society to meet these kind of needs? So what are the kind of specific organs, what are the kind of specialized say social forms of organization or parts of social structure that are capable of meeting these meeting these needs which are very important for every society. In his book Principles of Sociology, employing the organismic analogy, that is comparing organic bodily and superorganic societal organization, Spencer developed a perspective for analyzing the structure, function and transformation of societal phenomena. The same point that we have discussed so far. He talks about the comparison between the organic and the superorganic. He calls the society as the superorganic entity, and there are similarities, there are parallels, and he developed a perspective for analyzing the structure, function and transformation of social phenomena. So when you talk about the structure and function, it talks about its existence, its social statics, not social dynamics, as Comte made a kind of distinction. So on the one hand, you are concerned about how each and every society is structured and how does it take care of its own needs and necessities, and second major concern is that how do these societies transform, how do these societies undergo significant changes. So he wanted to develop a perspective that is capable of addressing both these dimensions simultaneously. And he has a list of similarities and differences, and as I mentioned earlier, I am not going into the details. They look at how how there are similarities between individual organism and the society, and as well as differences. And in his another book, The Study of Sociology, he so this book elaborates his focused thinking about developing sociology as a distinct social science. He accepted Comte's idea or Comte's argument that this new discipline must be named as sociology, not as social physics, and it has to be recognized or acknowledged as a science of the modern time, so science of a modern society. So the goal of the sociology must be to uncover the principles of morphology and physiology of all organic forms, including the superorganic society, with due care to its historic specificity. So he defined, or he visualized, or he envisaged sociology as a discipline that is aimed at which wants to uncover the principles of morphology and its physiology of all organic forms, including that of superorganic forms. And you know that how these terms, these medical terms or these biological terms influenced Spencer's thinking. And the only caveat or only important caveat he added was that they have to be located within its larger historical specificity, because human societies have a history and you need to have that kind of a historical understanding. You need to have that kind of a historical perspective to make sense of this physiology as well as morphology. But the thinking was heavily influenced by biology, thinking was heavily influenced by his preoccupation with this medical and biological terms. Now, employing organismic analogy, that is comparing organic, bodily and superorganic societal organization, Spencer developed a perspective for analyzing the structure, function and transformation of societal phenomena. So, exactly the same point that we have been discussing. He wanted to analyze the structure, the function, how a society is situated, and what are its constituent parts, how a particular society is distinct and different from other society, how different parts of a society are brought together, what is the kind of a structure, and what are the kind of a corresponding function. So, it was very specifically argued that you can't get a function performed on a sustainable manner without having a particular structure in place. So, usually how do we understand the term structure? Structure is usually defined in sociology as an ordered arrangement of parts. It consists of different parts, but these parts are not put together in a casual manner. These parts are organized, they are arranged in a systematic, in a specific manner. Ordered arrangement of parts is one of the usual definitions of the term structure. So, Spencer and most of the philosophers of his time, and of course later philosophers as well, including anthropologists, British anthropologists, wanted to understand how a society is structured. What are the specific ways in which a society is constituted, its economic, social and political and moral and religious elements put together, and how this particular structure gives rise to certain kind of function, and how there is a kind of a correspondence, and also how the kind of a transformation of social phenomena. So, he develops a model of restructuring social systems. In this model, the basic processes are forces causing growth in a system size, the differentiation of units, the processes whereby differentiated units become integrated, and the creation of a coherent heterogeneity which increases the level of adaptation to the environment. So, you can see that this is clearly what he means by the term evolution, as explained by Charles Darwin. So, if you go back to the definition that Herbert Spencer provided some time back, from a very incoherent, undifferentiated, simple entity, the society moves into a more coherent and differentiated one. So, here he says that in order to do that, there must be growth in system size. If he is talking about population, the population must increase in its size, it should grow in its size, and then there must be a differentiation of units. What does it mean, the differentiation of units? You need to have more division of labor. We will come back to this point when we discuss Durkheim. Durkheim's argument about division of labor is a very insightful argument about how societies become more and more developed. So, you need to have differentiation of units. In a society, you need to have specialized people or specialized institutions to take care of different things. For example, in traditional tribal societies, it's the most undifferentiated society. You don't have too many differentiated things. For example, education, there is no formal education thing. There may not be any formal religious thing. There is no formal law enforcement agency. There is no formal agency to produce things. Okay? So, each and everything is taken care, everything is handled by the same community. Whereas in an industrial society, in a society like ours, you have so much of differentiated functions, so much of differentiated agencies doing that, about entertainment, about transportation, about law enforcement, about justice delivery, about governance, about political systems. We know that how complicated a world that we are living in, and the creation of a coherent heterogeneity. So, the most important point is that this heterogeneity is not orderless. This heterogeneity is not something which is very ambiguous. Okay, this heterogeneity has a very specific coherence. It is ordered, it is systematic. It's a very complicated process, it's a very complicated situation, complicated heterogeneity, but this heterogeneity has a coherence, it has an underlying unity, and which increases the level of adaptation to the environment. So when the society become more and more complicated with a kind of a coherence, it develops its ability to adapt to the environment better. So that is the argument that Spencer is putting forward when he talks about the evolution of society. Now, what is this? What do we mean by this adaptation? He specifically argues that this adaptation into social change, he talks about 3 types of society: primary, secondary and tertiary compounding, by which he meant that a society has undergone a qualitative shift in the level of differentiation from a simple to a more complex form. Again, a typical unilinear evolutionary model from a primary and a secondary and a tertiary society. What is happening is that from primary to secondary and to tertiary, the compounding, the complexity is increasing, and complexity in terms of society, we understand it as a kind of a level of differentiation. A primary society, as I just mentioned a bit earlier, a primary society could be equated with a tribal society, a society which has not developed or progressed in the conventional understanding of the term, is a hunting and gathering society. A hunting and gathering society, that is the least differentiated society. And from there you have secondary compound society and the tertiary compound society. A tertiary compound society for Spencer could be a society in which he lived, where the differentiation have become too much. And he also contrasted between militant and industrial structures, 2 categories that he made. Militant structures are geared for aggression with strong central and coercive control of the individuals in a society. Industrial structures, however, are geared for peace. So industrial societies in which industrial structures predominate, have been described as having a spontaneously generated and loosely coupled mode of societal organization. So as per his classification, the militant societies are more characterized by aggression, whereas industrial societies are characterized by peace, and industrial societies are having a spontaneously generated and loosely coupled mode of societal organization. These societal organizations are more organic, they are more differentiated, they are more complex, but something actually holds these societies together. And now coming back to a kind of a critical evaluation of Spencer. See, Spencer is the one who coined the term survival of the fittest, which became heavily influential in the discussions on evolution. We are all familiar with the term struggle for existence and survival of the fittest, and which presents you with a very brutal character of the nature, where different species fight for each other, they struggle for their existence, and through a process of natural selection, only the fittest remain, all the unfit species, they disappear. And this is how one of the interpretations of this organic evolution of species has been elaborated. And here it is very interesting to see that Spencer adopts the similar argument to society. And it can be seen as a very cruel or insensitive argument that human beings are like different animals or species who are struggling for their existence, and only the fittest will survive. And he is the one who coined the term. So this idea that he developed, that certain societies are more fitter and thereby they deserve to live in the society, they deserve to flourish, whereas the less fit societies, less capable societies are fit to disappear. And this idea was very much used by many of these conservative philosophers during his time. And you also must remember the context in which he is making these statements. These statements are made when Europe was at the peak of its colonial expansion, and colonialism is one of the most violent episodes in human history. You know that the people who were a couple of 4 or 5 major European powers, military powers, they travel across the globe and they identify people who are less fit or less capable than them in terms of weapons and in terms of military prowess, and then dominate them, kill them systematically, wipe out entire population, and then conquer their place. So this colonial expansion or outright form of domination, violent domination, which was justified on the basis of race, which was justified on the basis of religion, because for most of these colonial conquerors, people who do not believe in Christianity were not even considered as human beings. So there was nothing sinful, there was nothing wrong in killing people, because you are not killing the true human beings. A true human being is somebody who practices Christianity. So if you see a savage, for example, if you see somebody who follows some other kind of religion, there is nothing morally wrong or religiously wrong in killing them. So in such a political climate where this form of naked aggression and naked dominance was the practice, okay, Spencer became a very important scholar whose arguments could be used to justify this kind of aggression and dominance, because he is talking about a society, a law where there is only the fittest survives, and the less capable people, less capable societies must give way for a more fitter, more capable, more stronger society. So this term, which became very famous or infamous as social Darwinism, became very prominent during his time, and 1920s, 1930s it became very heated debate. It led to heated debate and became a very controversial term. A social theory that applies the law of survival of the fittest society and integrally related to the 19th century rise in scientific racism. So you must be knowing that the rise of scientific racism, where biology was used, evolution was used, physical anthropology was used to categorize people into several races by using all kinds of scientific principles, by arguing that people can be divided into watertight compartments, people can be divided into very distinct forms of racial types by measuring by looking at the skin color, by measuring the texture of the hair, by measuring the skull, something called as the cephalic index, by measuring the nose, known as this nasal index, and a number of other indices. They prepared very scientifically looking, very convincing, very rigorous classificatory schemes where people across the globe are positioned. And the most important point is that all these scientific racism had a very open and a very blatant claim that the Caucasian race or the whites or the Europeans, they were the most superior race to anybody else. And we have seen its consequence in the Holocaust. We have seen its consequence that in the rise of Nazism in Germany, and maybe now currently you see the coming back of such kind of arguments, the rise of neo-Nazis, the kind of racist uprising across the globe. Even now, especially when science has convincingly proved that there is no pure race anymore. Every population, every individual in this whole world is a product of lot of intermixing of different races. The racial purity is a myth. It no longer has any scientific, biological or historical or sociological backing. But during his time, he played a very important role in propounding this argument that only the fittest need to survive. So when the evolutionary paradigm collapsed and fell into obscurity in the 1930s, so did Spencer's sociology. So if you look at the larger transformation of Spencer's theory, there is a consensus among sociologists that his popularity, his influence faced serious challenge immediately after 1930s, because even now he is considered as a sociologist who gave certain kind of legitimacy to this argument of social Darwinism, who was heavily influenced by the biological influence on social sciences, especially the kind of a mechanical adoption of the logic of evolution into that of society. So we will wind up the class now and we'll meet in the next class. Thank you.